So why do people hate software engineers?
150,000 tech workers have been laid off in 2022 alone.
Big tech companies like Meta, Google, and Amazon have been laying off a staggering amount of workers.
And some people seem really happy about these. But the sentiment hasn't always been this way. Yes, there's always been anti-tech sentiment. In the 19th century, skilled textile workers, known as Luddites, saw new machines as a threat to their livelihoods. So they used protest, vandalism, and even violence against the factories that used them.
They were the middle class of that day. And that's one of the reasons why they reacted so strongly when automation and machinery came along to take those jobs away.
In the earlier 20th century, people feared that the adoption of automobiles would lead to the demise of horse-drawn carriages.
The Unabomber. He began his reign of terror almost 18 years ago. Tonight, this former Berkeley professor is being held.
And Washington Post printed a rambling 35,000-word manuscript that railed against modern technology and ended in this chilling conclusion. In order to get our message before the public with some chance of making a lasting impression, we've had to kill people.
Also, the argument is sound. Technology will inevitably lead to better technology, which inevitably leads to artificial intelligence, which is inevitably going to take over the world.
He was also kind of juiced up post-LSD experiments, Harvard, all of that other stuff. However, there are more recent causes for the current tech backlash.
In the spring of 2000, the public markets lost confidence in the internet revolution. .com stocks crashed, billions of dollars in venture capital evaporated overnight, jobs started disappearing, and I began to question my own faith in the internet economy.
Fast forward, you have
Cambridge Analytica, which had worked on Donald Trump's presidential campaign, had improperly obtained access to more than 50 million user profiles.
Theranos was one of those Silicon Valley stories that sounded too good to be true, and it turns out it was too good to be true.
This morning, Charlie Gervais could be facing up to 100 years in prison accused of defrauding J.P. Morgan Chase.
Over $150 billion. In 3 days, that's how much the world's 15 largest cryptocurrencies lost in market value.
So it makes sense why people do not like tech people. Like if you were a valid observer, you'd understand why people would have some subtle apprehension against this group of people who they feel are creating financial crisis and spreading misinformation and undermining democracies.
I believe Facebook's products harm children, stoke division, and weaken our democracy.
So while everything was happening with COVID and tech companies were trying their best to stay on top of all the misinformation, and they ended up spreading more misinformation, and basically the little trust that people had in tech companies ended up being shattered in COVID. And then
many platforms have banned or restricted the president's accounts.
It's a sad day when big tech has more power than big government, that they can censor the president of the United States.
So while the world was locking down, there's this group of people whose basic work life was not affected in any way. In fact, in some ways, it was made better. And during this time, these tech companies were making more money than they've ever made before. They were these cushy tech workers who could work from their computers, put their hashtag Black Lives Matter on their bio. There were people creating PNG rocks and apes and selling them for 6 figures. And there were people creating their own weird currencies that would somehow disappear in seconds. These same people were dealing with the aftermath of old scams and creating new ones. And then there were those godforsaken
day in the life of somebody working in tech, living in Sydney. So I get...
But what made it very obvious for me that there was some kind of cultural backlash against tech workers was the fact that with the Silicon Valley Bank closure and what was happening in that situation, so many people wanted tech people to suffer. And I wondered, why is there this cultural backlash against tech workers? And I know I'm not going crazy because the tech backlash is also happening in media. If you look back at some of the earlier movies about some of our favorite tech heroes, they were clearly protagonists in the movies. You were clearly rooting for them and you understood why they were doing what they were doing. They were trying to build something great. And so even if they did things that were morally questionable, for what they were building, it made sense. You could justify it. That's how the movies went. Even in The Social Network, Zuckerberg is morally gray at worst. He's building something great. He's trying to build Facebook, and he's going against the old school Harvard elite. You could clearly see how the movie was framed in such a way that you would root for Zuckerberg, even if he did some things that were not nice. But our movies have changed. Tech CEOs are explicit villains driven crazy by ambition. And in some of these movies, tech workers end up doing some kind of weird penance for doing their jobs and actually making things that people want to use. So tech workers have gone from being outsiders and nerds building at the fringes to some kind of coddled modern-day bourgeoisie class living in their $5,000 studio bedroom in the Mission District, where they are pushing their liberal propaganda on the internet. As a former, current, retired member of that class, I can categorically say that that is false. And I can explain why. So let's say you are an ambitious startup founder and you want to start Uber for cats. Like once you get this app, your cat can take an Uber any single place on the planet. What do? You try to find a place where you can find investors and employees easily to build Uber for cats. So what do? You try to move to maybe the largest city around you, or you move to the Bay Area where there is still the largest concentration of investors and tech workers. So you are in the Bay Area and you're trying to find two people, either your co-founder or employees, or a venture capitalist. So your co-founder is probably one of those people being paid $700,000 to change the color of a button at Facebook. And you realize, oh shit, I have to be willing to pay my co-founder a decent amount of money for them to be willing to leave their job. So what do? I have to raise money. I have to go to the venture capitalist to raise some money for Uber. And VCs are very special because they have a very interesting business model where they invest in lots of different companies and they know an overwhelming majority will fail. Like they are very well aware of this. But the one Airbnb or Stripe, or in your case, Uber, would cover up the losses for all the startups that have failed. So when the VC is investing into Uber, the VC is like, look, I have invested in shitty startup number 1 and shitty startup number 2. I need you to take Uber to 10x, 15x, 20x the valuation so that it is worth it, so that I can cover up the losses for all these shitty startups. So not only do you have economic pressures from your founder to pay them a decent wage because also the Bay Area is expensive, but it's also like your VCs understand that you need to make a lot of money to recoup the losses for their previous startups. Also remember that your co-founder is also being actively recruited by other tech companies. So tinfoil hat me, conspiracy me here. A lot of these founders were also young, ambitious people who succeeded in the Bay. And there's an incentive for them to prevent those young, ambitious people from starting new companies. And so it makes a lot of sense if these companies make a shit ton of money to pay people a good amount of money to just work on a button at Facebook. Also, a lot of the budgets for new hires are higher than the budgets for promotions in tech companies. So that incentivizes people to job hop because literally they will get far more money. You have an entire system that breeds the kind of entitlement that people hate. Tech workers are literally not evil. They're just working based on the incentive structure of the entire system and how it's been set up. And although a lot of people fall into that myth of the ambitious startup founder who moves to the Bay and builds this company and becomes successful, a lot of people do not succeed. And so for every Zuckerberg or Elon or Gates, there are many, many more who attempted the startup game and ended up failing. Literally, the most realistic show about Silicon Valley and the Bay Area is about a group of ambitious young people who worked very hard on a startup idea, pivoted so many times, and still ended up with nothing. Even in my tiny YouTube channel, I've interviewed people who got into tech who were previously waitresses, or people who grew up on dairy farms, or people who literally went to prison for some time. And you realize that tech isn't full of lots of people who just went to Stanford. There are people who never even went to college in the first place and just built something and tried to find their way into tech. The only thing that tech workers actually did really right was get into the right industry at the right time, was get into an industry that was growing rapidly at low interest rates where they could take lots of bets and work at lots of different companies. So this is where I'm from, right? I am literally from Ebonyi State, which is like the least productive state in my region of Nigeria. I remember when I was on my apartment rooftop and I could look at the bridge that connected San Francisco and Oakland from that apartment. And I just kept on thinking, there is no industry on the face of the planet where a girl like me would have been able to work at single name tech companies, be able to say I touched those websites. It's so wild to me when I hear people complain about the issues in tech, because I'm like, I know tech isn't perfect, but it's better than law. It's better than medicine. It's better than finance. Like, of all the industries where you see people from weird backgrounds be able to have impact and change the trajectory of their life, tech is still the greatest one. So it is so wild to me when I see people in tech, hate on the industry that gave them the opportunities to succeed at the scale that they have. I can FaceTime my family in 3 different continents because A tech bro, Zuck, did some kind of magic math and made WhatsApp something that I could use and use for free. You are watching me on this godforsaken website, yes, this YouTube, this godforsaken algorithm of a website that never seems to recommend my videos to people that I want to watch it. And I think to myself that, like, at every other aspect of avenue of the world, whether it is medicine, education, the outcomes we actually want, that equality where we're like, everybody should have access to a good education or good healthcare, we get in technology. Zuckerberg uses the same YouTube I use. Jeff Bezos uses the same YouTube I use. Somebody in the most remote part of the world uses YouTube the same. Tech is literally the greatest equalizer we've ever had in society. And so there's this kind of weird disconnect when I see people in tech hate on tech. And so for me, I am so pro-tech. And I'm also so pro-tech because I think of the fact that in society, we don't have conquests anymore. We don't have places, avenues where people can manifest their fullest potential, apart from technology, apart from innovation. And there's still lots of problems in the world. So many fucking problems. And we need people who are ambitious and willing enough to actually try to solve these problems. So we need to be pro-technology, pro-innovation. Like, tech is in need of a desperate rebrand. Like, we need people who are pro-tech, pushing a pro-tech agenda. I look back at my life today, and I wouldn't be where I am if not for tech bros. I wouldn't have gone to tech if Zuckerberg and Gates and all the people who did the code.org ad did not do an ad talking about how coding was the future. I would not be who I am today if Zuckerberg did not build Facebook and I did not work there as an intern, and that didn't change my life. I wouldn't be where I am today if Alexis and Steve Hoffman did not found Reddit and all the people who invested in it and allowed me to work and meet some of the best people I've ever met in my entire life. I won't be where I am today if not for Zuck. Zuck seems to be doing everything in my life. If not for Zuck buying fucking WhatsApp and making that shit free so I could talk to my friends and family in every single part of the world. I see the world today and I'm just like, I am immensely grateful for tech bros for building the world we have today. And if there are things about the world that I do not like, this is where technology is wonderful. I am meant to go build it. And that's why I think tech is in desperate need of a rebrand. And this is why I'm here. This is why I'm here to do it. A tech ecosystem cannot thrive if the participants in the system, the builders, the investors, and the journalists gain some kind of sick and twisted pleasure from making people who participate in the system feel bad about their position. Technology and innovation is what we need in society to solve some of our most pressing problems, and we need more of it. If you are a young, ambitious startup founder and you want me to interview you, DM me, or I will be DMing you. I hope to be the rebrand I want to see in technology. We need people who love technology and are willing to scream to the rooftops that, oh no, yeah, I know it's not perfect, but we'll keep on building until we get a greater ecosystem. Hello, my name is Chisom, and I'm here to be the journalist that tech needs. The journalist that sees the way the world is moving, that isn't actually just siloed in this Bay Area bubble, but understands that technology is rapidly changing the way in which people in the developing world interact, and is very enthusiastic about that change. We need journalists who are passionate about tech. And if you believe in this mission, subscribe, DM me, let me know what you want us to talk about, and we will build a more equitable, greater society through technological innovation. I will see you all next time.